everybody, this is D Hunter, bringing another action figure review. Today, we're going to look at the McFarlane DC Multiverse Planet Raan Swamp Thing Megafigure. This is a red version of Swamp Thing when he was on Planet Raan. I got this from the McFarlane toy store. It arrived today, so let's take a look at the packaging. As you can see at the top, HS12 Plus. DC Multiverse Swamp Thing. Here he is in the package. We have a total of 4 hands, display stand, and collector's card. One side of the package, Swamp Thing from Swamp Thing, Planet Raan. Other side, Swamp Thing. At the bottom, there is his barcode, if that helps anybody. And at the back side, here's Swamp Thing from that comic. So with no further ado, let's open him up. Alright, now that we got this figure out of the package, here he is with all his accessories laid out. He has a total of 4 interchangeable hands, collector's card, and display stand. Before we load all that, let's talk about and check out the figure. So this is Swamp Thing from his space adventure. He went to Planet Raan with Adam Strange, revitalized the Earth. I think he got connected to their green, and it sort of changed him. I'm not 100% sure why he's red, but it looks like the flower has bloomed. Pretty cool idea for a variant for Swamp Thing, and it's actually from the comics. So let's take a look. Start with his face here. It looks like it's got just lumps and like tumors all over, but it's just little plants and buds. He still has that sort of signature Alec mustache type thing going on, the traditional Swamp Thing look. Flowers all over his head, eyes in the mouth. They do look like Swamp Thing. All this stuff on the side of his head, it just makes it look, I don't know, like it has growths or deformities all over it. Stuff all over him. All these blooming flowers. It's really interesting to look at, the paint job. Although at first glance it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff that's sculpted on here, a lot of details that are not painted. I could see some people repainting this guy and bring out all those details like they did with the original Swamp Thing. Speaking of, that is the body this is on. It's the regular Swamp Thing legs. Looks like bottom part of here. Most of the arms, they added some stuff on top. And here, at least that's what it looks like to me. Still, like I said, it's a cool idea for the variant. The sculpt's fantastic. Look at all those details that are just plain red, one solid color. Still, he looks cool. Weird. Like I said, I'm not really familiar with Swamp Thing, or his trip to Planet Raan, or why he's red. But it's a cool figure. Not something I ever knew even needed to exist. There's a lot of things you can do with this guy. You act like it's sort of Swamp Thing on fire. Or you could even say it's an evil Swamp Thing, the Crime Syndicate version. A lot of possibilities. And a closer look at his face and head sculpt. Details are good. Sculpt is good. Looks really, really weird. And I can still see the signature elements of the Swamp Thing under all that. And then here's the figure, broken down as far as you can go, with all of his removable parts detached. Now let's check out his accessories, starting off with the boring stuff. Here's his display stand, typical McFarlane display stand we've seen countless times before. And then we have his collector's card. As you can see, it's an image of the red Swamp Thing on Planet Raan. Swamp Thing, Planet Raan. On the back, there is a description. If you want to read that, pause now. And now for his hands. He has a total of 4 of them, 2 left hands and 2 right hands. Here he is with his first pair of hands. These are his fists. And here, with his second pair of hands, this is a pair of gripping or holding hands. Now I'm going to check out the differences and similarities between this Planet Raan Swamp Thing and the original version. It's the same base body, but some significant differences as well, so let's take a look. Starting with their heads. It's definitely a completely new head. It's not like they just put something on top of the old head. You can see the mouth screaming, totally different. As you go further down, if you look at the necks, I do believe they're the same. So I believe the torso is the same. They just added this entire sort of chest piece on top that wraps around to the back. I believe that is all added. You can see that little vein right there, which looks like they have the same sculpt. Probably not a vein, but root or whatever. You see the big one going on the side here. And then the arms. They do look like they're the same. They just added this piece on top. down to the hands, and then everything is the same for the waist down. So they are essentially the exact same figure, different head, and this one has some stuff added here, 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 and that's it. Here are all the different McFarlane DC Multiverse Swamp Thing figures they've made so far. I can't believe they made a total of 5 of them. They're all Megafigures, and they're all based off the same base body. We have both the regular and the Platinum Chase variants of the Rebirth Swamp Thing, this Planet Raan Swamp Thing, the Glow in the Dark Swamp Thing, and the new 52 Swamp Thing with antlers. Now that we've taken a pretty good look at both the figure and his accessories, let's check out his height. From bottom to the top of his head, standing about 11.4 inches tall, he is really, really tall. Can translate to over 30 centimeters. And for his articulation, starting with his head, of course, he can rotate side to side. They did a pretty good job making sure the stuff on his shoulders has complete clearance with his head. He can look up, not at all, down the tiniest little bit. Can't tilt his head or do anything else. Shoulders on a ball joint goes out about this far. This thing is obstructing it from going any further. Doesn't even go 90 degrees, and it really is no option to move that out of the way. Up, down, around. He's got that butterfly ring between his shoulder and chest, increasing the range of motion, although mine's not really budging very much. Cover up the giant gap. Bicep cut. Single jointed elbow, which has rotation. His wrist can rotate, and it's hinged. Torso is a ball joint. Rotate around. Forward and back. Another one in his waist. Very, very tight. It does rotate around a little bit. And forward and back. Get way more range of motion out of the torso than the waist in this guy. Mine is. It's not stuck, it's just very tight. Legs, completely to the splits. McFarlane style hip joints. Rotation, minimal on him. Legs go forward about that far. Back not much. Double jointed knees. And his ankle. Forward and back. Rotate. Tilt, rock. And to articulation. Here's Alec Holland working in his lab. Until his lab explodes under mysterious circumstances. Alec Holland is covered in chemicals and fire. He jumps into the swamp to save his life, transforming him into Swamp Thing. And I always remember Swamp Thing taking on some large creatures or monsters. Here's Swamp Thing fighting NECA's Ultimate Kessler Wolf. And here, taking on a McFarlane Witcher Ice Giant. And then, being overrun by a large McFarlane Witcher Kikamura. Here's Swamp Thing choking a couple of McFarlane Stranger Things Demogorgons, and then chilling with a couple of his tree ant buddies. Which one do you guys think will be the boss of the swamp? We got this giant tree ant, or Swamp Thing. Here's a woman handing a flower to Swamp Thing. This figure works for a good fill-in for his wife or girlfriend, Abigail Arcane. It looks like they could be best buddies. And say you got Poison Ivy. She gets into the swamp. She's escaping Gotham City, hiding from Batman. She feels very comfortable here in the wild, with all the green. Poison Ivy is intrigued by the Swamp Thing. She's heard of him, but never seen anything quite like this before. She thinks to herself, she could do a lot with Swamp Thing. If she can control him, just like she can control plants, she could use them to help eliminate the Batman. She reaches up in what the Swamp Thing thinks is in friendship. She works her magic. She has pheromones. She has the ability to control plants. She doesn't even have to kiss him. He's not a typical organic person. Here's Poison Ivy with her new bodyguard, her new minion Swamp Thing behind her. He's a gray color now, kind of lifeless, doesn't have his own energy. Here's Swamp Thing having a seat, kind of holding his head as he's shaking off Poison Ivy's control. Poison Ivy doesn't realize just how powerful Swamp Thing is. She thought she'd control him a little more easily than that. This could also work as a nice little shot. Swamp Thing, his head's hurting as his antlers are starting to grow in, as the boy becomes a man. And here's Swamp Thing about to get his revenge on Ivy. Now let's check him out. Next is some other action figures, starting off with some other Swamp Thing figures. Here are all the McFarlane DC Multiverse Swamp Thing figures. 5 of them, all based off similar oversized bodies and similar-ish type looks. I wouldn't mind a little bit smaller version of Swamp Thing, more traditional classic version of Swamp Thing. There are actually lots of different sort of incarnations they could make. Don't get me wrong, I really like the Swamp Thing figure, the original one. It's really well done. But he's not always that large. Sometimes he's larger, but usually he's a little bit, I don't know, like an 8-foot tall man, something like that. And here he is, next to a DC Direct Swamp Thing. Then, with some older Kenner movie Swamp Thing figures. Here are all of the different Swamp Thing figures I have in my collection. We have the McFarlane versions, the DC Direct version, and a bunch of these older Kenner movie Swamp Thing figures. I got those guys to use as Poison Ivy sort of creations or henchmen way back in the day when there were no other options. Here's this new McFarlane Swamp Thing, next to McFarlane's Poison Ivy, another DC plant-based character. Can't wait for McFarlane to do a comic version of her. And then here are all of my different Poison Ivy figures from various companies. And here's Swamp Thing, next to McFarlane's Mr. Bloom, Poison Ivy, Swamp Thing, Mr. Bloom. I hope McFarlane makes a Floronic Man. Now let's check them out, next to some other plant-based action figures, or creatures, or hybrids from different various companies. I use most of these for Poison Ivy creations or henchmen. Here he is, next to a few different Toy Biz, Treebeard, Ents from Lord of the Rings. Now the smaller ones are even larger than a typical McFarlane or regular action figure, and then you can tell how big this big boy is in the back. And here he is, next to a couple of Biollante figures. This is a Godzilla villain of sorts. It's some sort of organic plant hybrid creation thing. The one on the left is from Super 7, and the one on the right is a crappy one by Bandai. Then, next to a bunch of Demogorgon figures. These are from Stranger Things. I thought the Demogorgon looked like sort of an organic plant hybrid thing that Poison Ivy might create. The face looks like a flower opened up with all the petals. In the back left, we have the McFarlane version. On the back right, the Bandai Void series. And in the front, some more basic, crappier Bandai versions. And now, with a few Hasbro Marvel Legends group figures. Here's Swamp Thing, next to this crappy Little Shop of Horrors type of thing that I got off Amazon. Kind of crappy, but kind of cool at the same time. I kind of use this as a fill-in for Frank from Harley Quinn, the animated series. And here, next to some Resident Evil plant monsters. These are some of my favorite Poison Ivy creations in my collection. Then, with a couple of He-Man, Mossman figures, also excellent Poison Ivy henchmen. And finally, with a couple of Playmates Ninja Turtle Snakebeat figures on the left, and some sleek, sort of little kitty plant monsters on the right. Here's a Swamp Thing, next to several recently released McFarlane Megafigures. Swamp Thing has always been one of the taller Megafigures out there. And here he is, next to several regular McFarlane DC Multiverse Megafigures. You can see just how giant this Swamp Thing is compared to them. So overall, it is a cool, weird Swamp Thing figure. But it's definitely not more desirable than the regular green version. Now the extra sort of flowers or spores or whatever's on him, I mean, it's weird, but it just doesn't really look right. They just sort of added stuff on top of the existing body. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm so used to the regular version, but it just doesn't look right to me. His head is really weird. It's ugly. I assume it's fairly accurate. As a whole, I mean, he looks cool. It's really weird. He looks like an evil Swamp Thing, but that's not what it is. His accessories, only an extra pair of hands. I appreciate that, but he could have come with, I don't know, at least that sort of weaponized plant hand done in red color. Articulation is pretty good. Sculpt and paint job, also very nice. He's visually interesting and pleasing, to a point. If I were to rate this figure, first thought is 7, but I think he deserves a 6.5. It's a nice figure, definitely unnecessary, definitely weird, and definitely inferior to the regular Swamp Thing releases. Probably better than the unpainted Platinum version, though. So this is D Hunter. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked the video, press like below. If you have anything you want to save the video, add to the comment section. If you want to see additional action figure reviews from me, press subscribe. I do appreciate when you do that. Once again, this is D Hunter. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll talk to you guys real soon.